Pay attention to what's happening in your body. If you can, make room for it and be curious about it. So rather than like I would be shutting everything down that was happening in my body so I wouldn't be aware of it, all that's completely different now. So something's happening in your body, get curious about it, make some room. You don't have to have the answers right away, but hold a sense of curiosity about what it is and what it might be trying to say to you. You don't have to have the answer right away.
Hi, and welcome to Beyond Empty Nest. I'm your host, Jody Silverman, speaker, mentor, and Chief Dare Officer at Moms Who Dare. Every Thursday, I'll share stories of midlife transformation, happiness tips, and dare you to see the opportunities waiting for you so that you can make this next chapter even better than the last. If you're ready to dare, I'm ready to dare with you. Let's get into today's episode. For over 20 years, my guest today has been helping women, like many of us, go from lost and afraid to calm and capable during big life changes. Maureen Clancy is a licensed therapist in New York, New Jersey, group therapy practice owner, and trauma expert. She's the creator of the Gate Passages Framework, a structured bottom-up approach to healing trauma. And what I really loved most when I met Maureen is that she's not only trained and certified in various forms of psychotherapy, she combines her therapy with other holistic therapies such as Reiki, tarot, and flower essences. But Maureen didn't start out as a therapist. And today, that's what we're going to share today. We're going to talk about how you, like Maureen, can be the author of a new chapter during this midlife. Maureen, welcome to Beyond Empty Nest.
Oh, I am thrilled to be here with you, Jody.
I'm excited too. I know we had great, see, I always say this, I get the honor of meeting my guests before we hit record and we get to have great conversations. Sometimes I say I should hit record during those conversations because that would make an amazing compilation. But I do. I love your story. I love your journey. And as I shared with you earlier, Maureen, so many of the women who follow me, whether it's our audience members for the podcast or in the Moms Who Dare Facebook community, they're all looking to discover what's next for them during this midlife chapter, discovering purpose and meaning of fulfillment. And I just love how you call it authoring a new chapter. And before we dive into you really getting into the details and the nitty-gritty of the journey, share a little bit more about your background. Where did you start? And we're just going to dive into this conversation and share your journey so that other women know that, it's not too late.
Ooh, yes. Oh, I love this so much. I started out in a pretty big Irish family, and I was the writer in the family. I remember sitting in the back of our country squire, driving to whatever camping trip we were going to be on at that time. And I would write in the journal, here we are in Delaware. I can see the signs on the road and Mom's doing this and Brian's doing that. And I would be recording everything that was happening in the family. And I loved writing. I loved being able to connect with words. And so I really developed an identity of being a writer. And that really followed me as I got older through high school. And I thought maybe I could make a career out of this. And I had a lot of help and mentoring from English teachers that I had in high school. They're still very dear to my heart. And I got accepted into a college for English. And that was the beginning. I thought, oh, I am on my way. This is so exciting. I'm doing it. And I graduated and got pretty soon after a job with a daily newspaper in upstate New York.
Okay.
And it was so exciting. I thought, this is it. My dream is here. I'm doing it. This is great.
Did you have a beat?
I didn't have much of a beat. It feels like it was a pretty straight trajectory. That's a big word.
Yeah.
For that. I guess there were times when I wasn't really sure but it's hard to recall those things. I just feel like I had a beeline to doing writing for a living. And I really identified with that. And I wanted to make that happen. I remember bugging the editor and the Metro editor and the assistant editor at the newspaper I eventually started working at, saying, "Hey, I noticed that you really don't have on your the right person on your copy desk, and there's a mistake in the paper." And so, I was sort of working my way in and trying to find a way to make that opportunity for myself, which I did. I think they gave me a job sometimes to shut me up.
Yeah. Well, it pays to be persistent to point out things that I mean, that's daring. I mean, you were young. That was right out of college in your 20s to be able to show something that might be missing or a hole in the system where you could fill it. I mean, that's daring to have the confidence to do that. I mean, I remember my first job. I don't know that I mean, I was confident in my work. I don't know if I was confident about speaking up, but I have to share this because your story, when you say you were mentored by some really good English teachers in high school, but it reminds me of my daughter. So my daughter's 28 and she's a journalist.
Oh,
And
wow.
she really had some amazing English teachers who really embraced her and her abilities and nurtured them and dared her to stretch a little bit, all from middle school through high school. So it's really fortunate when you can connect with something that you know you love, like writing, and then
Yeah.
to have your teachers and influential people who can really make an impact in your life really notice that and nurture it. So I think that's wonderful.
Yeah. And that really is something that I was able to keep finding throughout. Those people who saw something in me that really impacted how I felt about myself. And, I think it's Mr. Rogers was always saying, find the helpers. And I really got some great helpers early on who saw that I had talent and that I could do this.
Oh,
And
I
it's
love it.
something that I kept looking for as, we'll get into all of that. And one of the things I love now is being that person for someone else.
Mm. Yeah, see, I
Yeah.
love that. It's like a full circle moment. So, all right, so you started out in your 20s out of college as a writer,
Mhm.
and today, present day, you are a licensed therapist and trauma expert.
Yep.
There is a lot in between there. So, I
Oh,
think
yeah.
what I would be curious if I were my own audience member, which I kind of am, is I would love to hear the journey. But before you get to the journey, just to fast forward, how old were you when you realized you wanted to make a change in your career?
Ooh, I love the way you're phrasing it because it didn't happen like that for me. There
Ah,
was something different that happened for me, right? And so, as is often the case with so many of us, we have an idea about where we're heading and what we're gonna be doing, and then life happens.
I love that. Life happens.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, in a completely unexpected way.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was very necessary. And it's only in hindsight, when we look back, that we're like, "Oh, yeah, that really needed to happen to me so I could get to where I am now." But in the moment, it just feels like the world is crashing down around you and you don't know what's going on.
That's so true. I say, we all say this. I mean, you've heard this from so many other people, the personal growth and coaches and the whole personal growth world, therapists. There are gifts and opportunities in every mess. And some of the gifts you see immediately, right? And others,
Right.
it does take time to process and move through it to say, like what you just said in hindsight, oh, okay, that's why that happened. So I want to
Right.
give, like, share like I said in the beginning, there's so many women that you said it, you said you develop an identity
Yeah.
with your career and what you've
Mhm.
always known you're good at, and especially if you're good at it and
Right.
your identity. So when it comes to being either an empty nest mom, you've walked away from a career, or even like for me, just realize that what I was doing was so not fulfilling anymore.
Yeah.
I would love for you to share like how did it happen for you?
Oh, yeah, happy to talk about this part because this is the messy
Yeah.
part that everyone wants to gloss over, but that's where all of the juiciness is in my story and in so many of the stories that I hear from women. So I am working on deadline all the time. I'm working with people who are really good, real craftspeople in the newspaper industry. And there's a part of me that's like, oh, I don't know if I'm really at that caliber. But I try to ignore that. I'm keeping, I'm on deadline, I'm plugging away. And the combination of those two things created a lot of tension in my body. And I wasn't really used to that. And instead of listening to what was happening in my body, I just kept going. I doubled down. You're smiling.
Yeah, well, that's what we do.
This is what we do. And so I didn't tell anyone what was happening, but I would start to wake up in the middle of the night, go to the bathroom, but I noticed that like the feeling was completely gone in my arm from like my shoulder to my fingertips. It just felt like dead weight. Like I could bang it against something and notice that there was a weight there. But if I wasn't looking down, I wouldn't know it was my arm. There was no sensation. And that kept happening and kept happening. And I thought, oh, this can't be good. And then I started to develop more specific pain symptoms. And so there'd be tingling in my fingers. There'd be sharp shooting pain from my elbow to my fingertips. I'd have a lot of, I don't know how else to describe it, but a crunchiness in my neck. I had a limited range of motion and I couldn't really move from side to side. Eventually, I couldn't even brush my teeth. It got to be so bad. It was a real progression. And so that's really what did it. I couldn't use my hands anymore. Yeah, it was really scary.
Your body was screaming at you.
It was screaming at me. And, in my late 20s, early 30s, I'm like, it's going to be fine. I can work through this because that's what I did. But nope, my body was telling me, you cannot keep doing this. You absolutely can't. So I had to go on disability. I had to stop working. I eventually had to leave my apartment where I was living. I was living in upstate New York. My family was living on Long Island. I moved back in with my parents. At this point, I'm in my early 30s. And I was really depressed. I mean, it was bewildering what was happening in my body. I was really anxious about that and not being able to control any of that. But I also felt like I'm in my early 30s here. Is this over now?
Yeah.
Whew, that was really hard. I sunk into a really deep depression.
Oh, I can only imagine. Because and when you go back to like when you're in your any 20s to 30s, and maybe I don't know, maybe it's different for the generations coming up now, but I didn't have the tools, and strategies that I have now for my personal growth journey to say, wait a minute, why do I have so much discomfort? What is going on here? This doesn't make sense. I'm young, I'm active, and to check in with how I'm really feeling and to say, okay, what around me is not working for me? You don't know that. You don't have those tools and strategies. And I don't even know if the generations, even my daughter's generation, because they're just starting out like we did and they want to succeed and they want to be the best at what they do. So there you are in your 30s and your whole body's breaking down and yeah, well, how could you be anything but depressed? Right?
Yeah, that was rough. That was rough. There also happened to be an expert on people in the newspaper industry who had become really debilitated like I was. He happened to be in Manhattan, in New York City. And so the convergence of living back home with my parents, and all of my siblings were gone. I was like, this is the worst thing that could ever happen to me. It ended up really being the best. And this doctor who was in Manhattan, and I couldn't do anything except heal. And so I was able to get in to see him pretty quickly. And was such a kind man. He's passed on now, Dr. Pasquarelli. He was a really sweetheart. And he's one of those helpers like Dr. Rogers, Mr. Rogers said. He was really one of those helpers for me. He said, you have something called repetitive strain injury.
Wait, say that again. It's what?
Repetitive strain injury.
Repetitive strain. Okay.
Yeah. And so it's an umbrella term for a bunch of musculoskeletal disorders that develop from overuse without any kind of training or preparation, like, to be on the computer all day like that, I really needed to be taking care of my body much more.
Yeah.
Stretching, exercising, all of those things. I didn't do any of it.
Well, isn't that interesting that you say that, Maureen? Because, here we are in March of 2024. And we had, I don't know how many, in 2000, we had 3 years of a pandemic. And there is no shortage of back injuries, knee aches, hip aches, shoulder and neck hurt from all spanning from 20s on up because of what you just said, because we sat for 3 years and the way we sat and the way we worked on our computers. So it's very interesting because I know that to be true. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't know it at the time, but there was a whole new field emerging around how we as human beings are interacting with these devices. And mostly we're adapting to them, leaning in, hunching over, rather than having, ears up around the shoulders, rather than having our devices adapt to us and having our postures more neutral. So he really, Dr. Pasquarelli really let me know, hey, this isn't just you. This is happening to so many of your colleagues across the country, but it's not only happening to newspaper reporters, it's happening to people who cut hair. It's happening to people who sit in front of a computer all day and code. So, this is an emerging issue for us as human beings here. And I was so happy to meet him. There is a repetitive strain injury. Like I said, it's an umbrella term, but there's one that most people have heard of, and that's carpal tunnel syndrome.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. That is a repetitive strain injury.
Yep.
Of the carpal tunnel in your wrist, right?
Right.
I didn't have that, but I had a bunch of the other ones.
Okay. So he helped you with that.
He really helped me. It took about 2 to 3 years before I could really start using my hands the way I used to. And there were a lot of setbacks. Like I would feel great one day and be like, oh, maybe I can help my mom out and vacuum the house. And then I'd be laid out for a week.
So was it all physical? Was it all physical?
Not all physical. It was also that I had no idea how to process my feelings. And they were really getting stuck in my body.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all of that tension and holding and stress, that also contributed to this. It wasn't just my posture. It was how I was living my life.
Yeah. I don't know why, and maybe this is a conversation for a whole nother time, but and I've learned from my daughter that something about journalism and journalists, there is some serious high stress stuff going on in that world. And that's a whole nother conversation. But I look, I obviously asked that question and I would have been floored if you said, no, it was all physical, Jody, because it's because how we do process our emotions and our feelings and our stress and anxiety, whatever it is, definitely impacts the way we hold what we do in our body, for our body, how we stand, how we sit. So it's got to all be related. So here you are, you find this doctor, you finally have an answer and you have strategies and exercises and, tools that you can use to fix it.
Yep.
And what happens?
Something really interesting. My mom, and she's done this to me a bunch of times in my life. She's a wonderful person. She said, I think you should try therapy. You're really depressed. I mean, this was like early in the recovery. I wasn't feeling all that great yet. You're really anxious. Why don't you see a therapist? No one in my family ever saw a therapist. We didn't do that kind of stuff. And my mom's a nurse, so she was really open to the modalities that were really going to help me. And she could see that I really needed something. So for a while, I was like, no, I'm fine. I'm good. Nope, I was not good. So I found a therapist. and started going. And that's when I really got to understand how little I knew about coping with my feelings. And I'm a very sensitive person. I've always been a sensitive person. I just didn't have any help with that, didn't know how to do it. I was a very shy person. So that opened up a whole new layer of healing. I don't even know that I needed.
Yeah. It always
Yeah.
works that way. Therapy is a beautiful thing. It's not easy
Nope.
to get honest and talk about yourself, but when you do it, I can't stress enough. And I think I tell moms all the time, when your kids sit down to write their budget, when they go off on their own and they want you to help them with their budget, when they're
Mhm.
finished, go back and add in at least $200 more a month. It should be weekly, but $200 more a month for at least once a month therapy
That is
with,
great.
with
I
some
love
type of
that.
therapist, because everybody needs one. Everybody could use somebody objective on your team who's objective to just receive you and
Mhm.
support you in a way that, those closest to you really can't.
Right.
And if you can
No.
get over the fear of being vulnerable and sharing, and I know it's scary because sometimes we can uncover things that we don't want to admit to ourselves in therapy, but when you do, it is very, very freeing.
Oh,
Very
yeah.
freeing. Yeah.
Yeah. It really changes
You're
things.
discovering therapy and you're discovering the gifts from therapy.
Yeah. And my therapist could pretty early on see that my main strategy for coping with stress was to stuff it down, to bottle it up. I'm fine, nothing to see here, move on. And she was great in the way that she worked with me in that. It was a slow process. I always say therapy happens at the speed that your nervous system can handle. And at that time, my nervous system really couldn't handle much. So it was a long process, but it was really interesting. The light bulbs that started to go off. And she could see, like, you've been through something really traumatic. And I was like, no, it's just a hiccup. I'm going to get better. I'm going to go back to journalism. And she would just look at me like, really? Okay, let's take a look at that. And she's a person who really framed it as trauma. What
Yeah.
happened to me? My body wasn't doing the things that it could do before. The career that I started was completely over. I had no financial means to support myself. And thank goodness I had a family who was really supportive. Otherwise, I'm not sure what would have happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's really, really traumatic. Yeah. So I was in therapy for like, I don't know, 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah. And really got to know myself for the first time. It was fascinating. So there's something, concurrent that happened. I was doing all of this physical stuff with Dr. Pasquarelli and the physical therapist. I was also working with this therapist to really unpack how I was moving through the world and figure out how could I do it differently in ways that don't impact me physically.
Mhm.
And I loved it. I loved that whole process. Eventually I got to the point where I was like, wow, this never would have happened. I never would have gotten to this place. I had no idea that all of this healing could take place. I thought it was fine.
Yeah.
So that's when I started to get the sense, I'm so glad that I did get injured because I'd still be trying to make this work as a
Yeah.
newspaper reporter. And
Yeah.
clearly it wasn't for me. The other thing that I also found out in therapy that I didn't know is that I loved writing, but when I was interviewing people, I was deeply connecting with them. And rather than telling their story, I wanted to hear more about that story. I wanted to go deeper into that. I wanted to follow up with them. I wanted to see what happened. And that just wasn't possible in my role as a reporter.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
But that can happen as a therapist.
Right. Yes. So I'm in therapy. I'm like, gosh, maybe I could do this. Maybe it's a good fit. I mean, the pieces started to come together really slowly as my depression lifted. But yeah, once I started feeling better, I was like, okay, maybe this is something I could do.
So, and it's interesting because you take the piece of you as a journalist, which is the curiosity. a journalist has to be curious, and journalist has a way of, you're sharing someone's story. That as a therapist, you're still curious, but you're not sharing. You're holding space for, and you're supporting them through their story, through their journey. So, okay, so we're going to fast forward.
Yeah,
You obviously went back to school.
I did. I went back to grad school. I wasn't the oldest person in my class, but I was the second oldest person in my
So
class. I
how
was
old
in
were
my
you in
late
grad school?
30s.
Your mid-30s. Okay.
I started at 35. I graduated at 37.
All right. And you've been practicing ever since.
I've been practicing ever since. And I really thought I was going to go into workplace trauma because that's what happened to me. And
Right.
we mine the things that have happened to us so we can help other people. But something interesting happened during my first year of field placement. In social work school, you get placed in an agency or a school or an institution for like 2 days a week. So you could really learn by doing. And I was placed in this tiny little trauma department in a community mental health center. And I thought, this is not for me. No, I don't want to do this. And that lasted for about 2 weeks. And then I was like, this is the best. Whoa, this is amazing. I have no idea what I'm doing here, but I like it. So I started connecting to that pretty quickly. And it was so fun once that started to happen.
I think, see, and I love, even though your journey of authoring, and I love how you call authoring a new chapter, it started in your 20s and your 30s. The same can happen for somebody in midlife.
Oh, yeah.
See, it's not, it's never too late to get in touch with, what lights you up inside. How do you feel when you see somebody doing X? Because I always say to people, what is something that lights you up? What is something that used to light you up? Or what is something, this is my part, is what is something you see somebody else doing that you secretly are thinking, oh my God, I would love to do that. That was me when I would sit in the audience and see a motivational, inspirational speaker.
Wow.
Like, I want to do that. I'm like, I want to make people feel the way this person is making me feel. I was in
Oh
sales,
my God.
but now I should be a public speaker. So so that's what I'm just like, it's like it's paying attention to yourself. It's paying attention to how you feel. And
Right.
I do love that. I love every part of your story because it is the messy. There's sad, there's hard, there's messy. And then there's all those gifts of those people coming in. And I love how you say it. And I didn't realize it was Mr. Rogers, who sees something in you, find the helpers. And I love that. If you can't see it, ask people what they see in you. What do you think I'd be good at? What do people, people will share with you their opinions, right? All day long.
They will. I would caution you to make sure you ask someone who you feel safe asking.
Yes.
And that the answer is going to be delivered with love and respect.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's just like I say, be careful who you share your dreams with as well.
Oh, yeah, exactly. It's the exact same thing. Right. But I love how you shared Jody. You're sitting in the audience and part of you was like, I want this.
Yes. I'm like, and I kept it a secret for a long time. Like, because I'm like, well, there's so many reasons for that, but we're going to have you back. We'll do another episode because I do want to, because right now what you do is you help women now, like most of us, go from lost, afraid to calm and capable during big life changes. And I think that's a whole nother episode. But what I really wanted, my real takeaway, and I'm going to let you end it with, what do you want the audience to take away most from your story of journalist to where you are today and all the mess in between? What would be the 1, 2, or 3 things you want them to take most away for them at the end of this episode?
Ooh. The first one is, because I'm a body-based therapist, pay attention to what's happening in your body. If you can, make room for it and be curious about it. So rather than like I would be shutting everything down that was happening in my body so I wouldn't be aware of it, all that's completely different now. So something's happening in your body, get curious about it, make some room. You don't have to have the answers right away, but hold a sense of curiosity about what it is and what it might be trying to say to you. You don't have to have the answer right away. Just notice. So that would be the first thing.
Well, I'm gonna stop it there because we always end with a dare, and that's the dare. That's the dare.
That's the dare.
That's the dare. And my audience knows dare is my playful word of stepping out of your comfort zone, trying new things, experiencing something new, and that is the perfect dare to end this episode on. And your dare is to pay attention to what's happening, what you're feeling in your really your body, and get curious about it, make room and space for it. And the key to what you said, Maureen, that's the mic drop moment, is you don't have to have a solution for it. You just, the first step is becoming aware of it and getting curious and making space for it. So that's the dare. That's the
dare.
Yep. Love it.
I love that.
I love it. Maureen, thank you for sharing your story so openly and honestly, because I know that there are many, many women out there listening, and maybe even a few men. And maybe we can even help our children, as our adult children, as we navigate life, as parents with adult children as well. And it always helps to share stories. I'm getting chills like right now whenever I say something that I know is true, like I'm getting chills because you were very open to share your journey and your story, and I'm grateful for that. And we will have you back to talk about building resilience in challenging times, because we are in challenging times, and life is always challenging. So we will have you back. I appreciate it, and I'm grateful for you sharing your story today with the audience. Thank you so much.
Oh, I've loved this time with you and connecting with your audience, and it's really been a joy.
Well, you know what I'm going to say next. So what was it? What was it, everybody? What was your takeaway from today's episode with Maureen Clancy? Our mission is for you to take one thing away from every episode. If you take one strategy, one tip, one idea away from each episode, you are on your way to building your resilience and creating the daring life that you dream of and you desire and you deserve. And so don't forget about the dare. Check out how to get in touch with Maureen, and the dare will be written below in the show notes. And we'll be back next week with another episode of Beyond Empty Nest. Until then, dare on. Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond Empty Nest. Head over to jodysilverman.com for our full show notes, more information, and additional resources to support you through empty nest and midlife. And if you've enjoyed today's show and are ready to embrace this midlife chapter, then you must take the Happy for No Reason quiz. When you take the quiz, you'll discover what your happiness set point is and how you can increase it and continue to strengthen it. This is just one key to navigating life transitions and discovering your most fulfilled and daring life. So go ahead, click the link below and take the quiz now. I'll see you next Thursday. Dare on.